Just 3.5 years ago, the NFC North was a lot different. Aaron Rodgers was the quarterback for the Packers. Matthew Stafford was still the quarterback for the Lions. Kirk Cousins was the quarterback for the Vikings. And Mitch Trubisky was playing in Chicago. And obviously since then, a ton has happened. And after this offseason, this fall, we are going to be going into a brand new and revamped division. Now, I think the North is one of the strongest divisions in all of the NFL. It's close with some of the AFC divisions for the top spot, but definitely the strongest in all of the NFC. And it's not even close. The East is a joke. Sorry, Cowgirls. With all the changes that have taken place within the North this offseason, I think it's safe to say that every fan base thinks their team can win the division. It's going to be interesting. Let's get into everything that's happened. Last season, the Minnesota Vikings' weakest link on their team was their secondary, ranking 24th in passing yards allowed per game. And this is looking like it's going to be a problem for them once again heading into next season. I'm sorry, but I just don't feel like their current starting lineup can compete with the league's best. They brought in Byron Murphy to be their CB1 last season from Arizona, and he had an average season. They have Harrison Smith, but he is way out of his prime, entering year 13. They also have a Caleb Evans, who is still young and has only started 17 games in his career. However, they do have Cameron Bynum, who is a solid young safety, and I would think to be the highlight of their secondary. So, what have the Minnesota Vikings done to address this issue of having a weaker secondary this past offseason? Well, they signed Shaquille Griffin to a 1-year deal, but he's been dropped from 3 different teams over the last 12 months and won't be a starter. The only other move they've made is drafting DB Kyrie Jackson out of Oregon with their 108th pick in the draft. And he is definitely a project cornerback. Won't be a starter right away. So is the Vikings defense just terrible? Well, no. I believe just their secondary is weak. Their defense overall has really improved over the last year. In 2022, the Minnesota Vikings ranked 30th in points per game allowed and 31st in passing yards per game allowed. They brought in Brian Flores, and last season he improved them to 12th in points per game allowed and 24th in passing yards per game allowed. So how did the Vikings improve their defense so drastically without improving their secondary much? Well, they did that by leading the NFL with a blitz rate of 47.9%, the 10th highest for any team through 17 weeks since ESPN began stat tracking. And this led Daniel Hunter to drop 16.5 sacks last season, with Wanham contributing 8. And the Vikings have added to that fire of their pass rush by signing Jonathan Grenard, who had a breakout season last year with the Texans, dropping 12.5 sacks to a 4-year, $70+ million deal. Now, the only risk with this signing is that Grenard has never played a full season in the NFL and has a injury history. Now, the biggest move that the Vikings made for their defense was drafting Dallas Turner with their 17th pick in the 2024 NFL Draft. Linebacker out of Alabama, an absolute stud. He's going to be scary for Chicago, Lions, and Packers fans. Overall, I think the Vikings defense definitely struggles in their secondary, but it is definitely made up for with their pass rush. And Brian Flores has done a great job utilizing the blitz. The quarterback can get the ball out fast, though. I think the Vikings may struggle. Their defense, though, is definitely good enough to be competitive. Offensively is where I'm worried for the Vikings. They signed Aaron Jones as their running back. Aaron Jones is older. He had a good week 1 last year, was hurt all season, and then came back for the playoffs. We all know Kirk Cousins was shipped off to Atlanta, and the Vikings signed Sam Darnold to a 1-year, $10 million deal. And we all know that the Vikings traded up to select J.J. McCarthy early in the first round. So with Kevin O'Connell running the offense, what will it look like? Will J.J. McCarthy start week 1? Will it be Sam Darnold and McCarthy will work in later weeks? I think it'll be really interesting because the Vikings offensive line to me is a little weak. Their wide receiver crew obviously is among the best in the league, but they have no run game, and Aaron Jones isn't going to be able to pick up 5 yards every play with no offensive line. And JJ McCarthy was on a run heavy team in college. The Vikings pass rush is definitely no joke. They have great talent defensively and offensively, but will they be able to pull together and have a winning season and contend for the division? I'm not so sure. Moving on to the Chicago Bears, we all know they drafted Caleb Williams #1 overall, and he'll be starting week 1. They drafted Rome Odunze #9. It's a lot of talent within those 2 picks. And with the Bears' 3rd pick in the draft, they drafted versatile lineman Kieran Amagaji. Protect the quarterback, just drafted #1 overall. The Bears killed their draft. It's kind of hard not to. You had 2 picks in the top 10. Now, even before their draft and offseason, the Bears have been on the come up. In 2022, they were 32nd in points per game allowed, 31st in rushing yards per game allowed, and 18th in passing yards per game allowed. But as you can see, they improved these numbers a ton going into 2023. 19th from last in points per game allowed, second to last to first in rushing yards per game allowed. Technically, it was the Lions, but then the website I use includes the playoffs, and that put the Lions before the Bears. Did decline in passing yards per game allowed, but that doesn't matter because that big of a leap in rushing yards and then a huge leap in points per game is what matters. Points per game is the most important. Now, over the last year, the Bears have done a ton of rebuilding. They re-signed their top corner, Jalen Johnson, after his rookie contract to a 4-year, $70+ million deal with a ton of guaranteed money. They signed DeAndre Swift, which isn't too crazy. Gonna have a weak running back room this season, but it'll be all right with Caleb Williams throwing the ball. They signed Keenan Allen, which is a big pickup. He is a bit older and did deal with injuries last season, but Keenan Allen was still phenomenal when he played. They have DJ Moore still. We saw Justin Fields utilize him. It's gonna be crazy to see what Caleb Williams can do. The Bears have really built around drafting Caleb Williams #1 overall. They do not want to fail him, and I think the Bears are going to be a strong team. They also signed tight end Gerald Everett to pair him with Cole Kmet, their other tight end, who is coming off a career year. So offensively, there's tons of weapons for their new quarterback, Caleb Williams, and a lot of offensive line additions. I think we're going to see how their offensive line plays to really rank them. There's lots of new additions, a lot of new depth, and last year they were riddled with injuries. Defensively, though, there's a lot of players that played well last season. Montez Sweat, Tremaine Edmonds, both great. Sweat on the pass rush. Edmonds brought in 4 interceptions, and Stevenson also had a phenomenal year, 4 interceptions as well. Their defense has a lot of solid players. I know it's the Bears, and they usually fail their quarterbacks, and they're usually bad, but this team definitely has potential to do what the Texans did and be really good and make the playoffs. Moving on to the Packers, we know they've had a pretty solid defense over the past few years. In 2022, they were 16th in points per game allowed, 26th in rushing yards per game allowed, and 6th in passing yards per game allowed. They moved up a bit in points per game allowed to 13th, dropped a little bit in rushing yards per game allowed to 28th, and dropped in passing yards per game allowed. They're top 10, now they're just outside of it. The Packers made 2 big moves, one on either side of the ball during free agency. The first was signing Xavier McKinney, safety, to a 4-year, $68 million contract. The new DC for the Packers, Halfley, really prioritized the safety. He wanted to bring in a vet. Xavier was on the Giants for the past few years, was really good. The Giants secondary wasn't actually that bad. And so that's a huge pickup for the Packers. And then obviously we all know the Packers got Josh Jacobs to a 4-year deal. The Packers offense is pretty solid. Jordan Love is a good quarterback. Started off slow, but ended the year pretty high, playing well in the playoffs. And I think they're going to pick up right where they left off. I think they really only have one running back though. Josh Jacobs, I don't really care for AJ Dillon. I think he's a bit overrated. He has big legs. I get it. I felt like Aaron Jones was outperforming him when he played last season. Christian Watson, Dobbs, and Reed, great wide receiver core. I really like Reed. The offensive line, I wouldn't say is top tier, but it's not bad by any means. You saw him hang in there in the playoffs. That crew can protect with pass rush. We saw him do it against Dallas and the 49ers. Jordan Morgan, first-round draft pick. Great pickup there. Add some depth. I do wonder how good Josh Jacobs will be with the Packers because, you need a good offensive line to make room for your running back. Josh Jacobs won't be able to break 3 tackles every single play. The Packers' run blocking is pretty good, but I feel like it could be a bit better. And defensively, their defensive line is pretty weak. They don't really get a lot of good pressure on the quarterback. They really shine with their secondary, Quay Walker, Alexander, now McKinney. They have potential to pick up where they were in 2022 and be a top 10 secondary, especially now with the new DC. They really needed a new DC, so that's a good thing for them. Joe Barry was not good, and the Packers, they just really struggle against the run, so we will have to see, will they be able to put a stop to that? And lastly, for the Lions, it's pretty simple. They were bottom 5 in rushing yards per game allowed, points per game allowed, and passing yards per game allowed in 2022. Last season, number 1 in rushing yards per game allowed, and then still bottom 5 in passing yards and points per game allowed. However, they still finished with a phenomenal record and won the North. So it was finally time to fix their secondary problem. They drafted Terrion Arnold, going to be a lockdown corner. Kirby Joseph is going to be entering his 4th year, phenomenal. Brian Branch is going to be entering his 2nd year, he was phenomenal. They signed Carlton Davis from Tampa, CB1, lockdown. They signed Amik Robertson out of Las Vegas. He shows a lot of potential. They drafted Ennis Rakestraw Jr. out of Missouri. Seems like he is a scrappy player. Melifonwu emerged last year, was a great player. Aiden Hutchinson is going into year 3, one of the best edge rushers in the league. And then the big boys, Ali McNeil, signed DJ Reader from Cincy, signed Marcus Davenport. He's coming from Minnesota. Jack Campbell and Alex Anzalone, Derek Barnes. Anzalone played phenomenal last year. Jack Campbell is going to be entering year 2. They struggled with the pass rush last year. They phenomenal. Number 1 run defense, but the pass rush was all right. Hutchinson hopefully can get there more. You got DJ Reader now. Ali McNeil's been better, and then now there's Marcus Davenport. They want to get pressure on the quarterback. The Lions won the North last year, and this year is going to be harder to win the North. I think they still can do it. Obviously, if you don't know, I'm a Lions fan. I swear I'm not biased. Fuck the Pack. But the North is going to be way harder to win this season, and the Lions can definitely do it if their secondary plays how I think they will play, and everyone else thinks. Terrion Arnold and Kirby Joseph coming back, Ennis Rakestraw, Amik Robertson, these guys, Carlton Davis III. If they really play how they've been talking in their press conferences and how I think they will play, the Lions should be able to win the North. It seems like Brad Holmes saw the competition and really went all in. Like, we got to stay on top. We got to stay the top dogs. We need some extra firepower. We really need help in these areas, pass rush, and really need help in the secondary. We cannot let that slide anymore. We're going all in. Offensively, only really one change. Jared Goff, again, phenomenal. David Montgomery and Gibbs, phenomenal. St. Brown, Williams is really going to need to pick it up a bit. I think he'll be great. I think we're going to see a lot more of him. We saw him score there in the playoffs, demonstrate his speed. Still, people question his hands ability. I think he has it. I've made a video on him before. But I guess we will have to wait and see. Are the doubters right or are they wrong? Sam Laporta, a stud. Then again, one of the best offensive lines, if not the best offensive line in the NFL. Picked up Kevin Zeidler from the Ravens. He seems like he's a stud. Hopefully he lives up to his potential. And last year we drafted Colby Sorsdale. Hopefully you can see him fill in. There's always going to be injuries throughout the offensive line. In the end, the NFC North though has really pumped up. It's a strong division. Like, even the Vikings, I'm a little bit low on the Vikings, but they have a lot of potential defensively with Brian Flores, and if JJ McCarthy plays well, there's Justin Jefferson and Addison out there. They can be a scrappy team like last year when they beat the 49ers. I don't think any team in the NFC North is going to be taken down easily. There's not going to be blowout free wins. It's not like playing the Panthers last season. The Bears are going to be good. Caleb Williams is good. He might make mistakes. I'm not really sure how good Caleb Williams will be. Will he be like the next Patrick Mahomes? I don't know. Because if he's not, it's going to be tough because the expectations are really high. The Bears defense, though, has improved a ton. The Bears offense has a ton of weapons. The offensive line, they picked up a ton of players. They had everything set for Caleb Williams to be successful. Let's see if he can do it. And then the Packers, they've been pretty good for the past quite a while. And they've stayed good now with a new quarterback. Their defense, I think, is taking a little bit of a back step, but taking a new DC in, hopefully he fixes the run defense. They're going to be good. Their offense is really strong as well. They can put up points. We saw Jordan Love throw for a ton of touchdowns last season. It's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. The NFC North is going to be out there. And the NFC East, trash. If you enjoy my content, I'd appreciate if you could like, subscribe. Helps me out a lot. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I love talking to people about sports, so I make these videos. It interests me. Tell me your opinions. We'll have a little debate. Everything, though, cordial. Unless you're a Packers fans, I'm coming for you. I'm joking. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching. Fuck the Packers.